Have you ever wondered, just one cup of coffee can change a person's life? One ordinary morning in a small seaside town, a strange man walked into an old coffee shop. He wore a worn-out coat, his eyes were tired, and he looked like someone who had traveled a long way. No one knew. He was once a billionaire, once in charge of a financial empire, and no one knew. He was on the run. The waitress, a quiet black woman with sad but warm eyes, saw something in him. She didn't ask, didn't say, just quietly placed a cup of black coffee in front of him. But under the saucer, there was a small piece of paper, just one line. "Don't turn around. Someone is following you." In that moment, everything stopped. If it were you, what would you do? Trust a stranger, or believe you were being hunted? This story is not just about secrets or power. It is about two people, one who once had everything, and one who only had faith finding light in the darkness. And perhaps, after listening to this story, you will realize, sometimes, just one small action is enough to save a life. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel so we can start that emotional journey together right now. Main Street in Harbor, Maine was still wet from overnight rain. The sky was a pale gray and hazy. Wooden signs hung over small shops swayed in the sea breeze. The smell of roasting coffee wafted from the corner of Harbor Brew, where locals gathered each morning. The door opened, the bell rang softly. A man entered. His brown coat was old, his shoes were covered in dirt, and his shoulders were hunched forward as if he had traveled a long way. He was in his 50s, and his demeanor was calm. His gray hair was neatly combed, and his ash-gray eyes surveyed the room as if measuring every breath in the air. No one paid any attention to him. In this small town, strangers were quickly forgotten if they kept quiet. Behind the counter, Maya Brooks, the black waitress, was wiping down her 10th cup of the morning. The light coming through the window reflected off her tanned cheeks. She didn't look at the man, just said softly, "Hello, sir. Black or latte today?" Her voice was low, light, and dry like the sea breeze. The man replied, "Black coffee. No sugar. Would you like to take it away or have it at the table? I'll sit down for a moment, if you don't mind." Maya nodded slightly, put the paper cup down on the counter, and started pouring hot water. The coffee grinder hummed, mixed with the murmur of customers. Everything was normal and quiet until their eyes met, just for a second. But there was something different in that look. Maya didn't ask his name, but she saw something in his eyes that resembled fear, a fear that no ordinary person could have. She set down her coffee cup and smiled. On the saucer was a folded piece of paper, the size of a palm. The man looked up, paused. She said softly, "Black coffee, hot. Be careful not to burn your hand." He picked up his coffee and walked slowly back to the table in the corner. Outside, the cold wind was blowing again. The doorbell rang as someone left the cafe, leaving an awkward silence. Sitting down, he removed the lid of the glass. The heat obscured his suspicious eyes. The small piece of paper was still on the plate. He opened it. There was only one line written in thin pencil. The handwriting even and careful, "Don't turn back. Someone is following you?" His hand paused in midair. The coffee rippled. His eyes scanned the mirror, the window, the silhouette of a man reading a newspaper at a nearby table. A young couple, a pregnant woman. No one looked at him, but something was wrong. He folded the paper and put it in his pocket. A chill ran down his spine. Maya was wiping down a table from the counter. She pretended not to see. But when he looked up, her gaze flickered to the window, as if beckoning. Outside, a black pickup truck was parked close to the curb. Two men sat inside, motionless. The stranger took his first sip of coffee. It was bitter. Hot, but the bitterness sobered him up. He looked at Maya again. She turned away. Many questions arose in his mind. Who was she? Why did she know? And who were they? He left the shop, leaving behind a few bills and the receipt. As he stepped out the door, the sea breeze hit his face. Above, a flock of seagulls circled. Maya watched him through the window. Her hand tightened on the towel, her eyes shaking slightly. Another employee's voice rang out. "Who is he?" "He's just passing through." She smiled and continued wiping the table as if nothing had happened. But beneath the apron, Maya's heart was pounding. She knew the man was no ordinary man. She recognized him, not from his face, but from an old photograph that had been removed from the newspaper 3 years earlier, a photograph of Ethan Ward, the founder of the energy conglomerate Ward Tech, who had vanished from the financial world without a trace. She didn't understand why he was here, but she knew that if he was being watched, she was in the crosshairs too. Outside, the pickup truck still hadn't left, and when the doorbell rang again, Maya looked up, the smile still on her lips, the smile of someone who was used to living in fear, but remained calm as if she had never been afraid of anything. The next morning, Harbor was shrouded in fog. The small Atlantic town was as quiet as ever. The sound of waves lapping in the distance, the smell of baked goods and coffee wafted from Harbor Brew. It was all so familiar that you could predict the sound of doors opening and the footsteps of regulars. Maya Brooks arrived 30 minutes before the shop opened. She was always the first in and the last out. Her hands were rough from dish soap, her nails short and smelling of roasted coffee. Her denim apron was frayed, but she always folded it neatly. She brewed the first pot of coffee of the day, sat on a wooden chair near the window, and looked out at the sea. The early morning seawater was pale gray, like the man's eyes from yesterday. His image still lingered in her mind. The man was silent. His eyes were cold and sad, as if he had seen too many things but could not speak. She wondered if he had read the note she had left, if he had trusted her, and most importantly, if they were still watching him. The door opened and the landlady walked in, bringing with her the smell of a cold wind and some morning papers. Maya stood up and smiled. "Good morning." "Helen." "Hello, Maya. Was it busy yesterday?" "Not bad. There were a few strangers, but nothing special." Helen smiled and set the papers down on the counter. She was in her 60s, with white hair, and had given Maya a job when she had nowhere else to go. No one in town knew Maya's past. They only knew her as a quiet, hard-working girl who never asked questions. The morning passed slowly. The coffee maker hummed, and customers trickled in and out. An elderly couple of fishermen, 2 high school students picked up waffles to go, and a few passers-by stopped in to rest. Everything was peaceful, as if nothing had happened the night before. But, in Maya's mind, the wave had not yet subsided. At noon, when the customers had left, she took the opportunity to go to the back of the shop and rest for a while. The small room was dim, except for the sound of an old fan clacking. She turned on her phone and scrolled through the news. Nothing about the man from yesterday. No accident, no disappearance, no sign of him. She sighed in relief, then scolded herself for caring. Maybe she was too suspicious. Maybe he was just a stranger passing by. But then she remembered the black pickup truck parked outside. It was still clear in her mind, and the cold eyes of the man behind the wheel. She told herself she was right to warn. Maya took an old photograph from her pocket. It was of her and her father standing by the beach. He was wearing a blue jacket, smiling kindly, holding a newspaper with the headline, "Local Reporter Exposes Haven Industries." The photo was taken 3 years ago, just weeks before he disappeared. Maya was a young reporter then, following her father, a veteran journalist, to investigate a chemical leak at the Haven plant on the south bank of the river. They discovered tons of waste being illegally dumped into the water supply. Her father intended to publish the full report, but before the article could be published, he disappeared without a trace. The police concluded it was an accident. Maya didn't believe it. She investigated, reported it, and was fired. Finally, she left the city, carrying her fear with her, for Harbor. From then on, she stopped writing, just worked, kept quiet, and tried to forget. As the afternoon wore on, the weather turned cold. Maya cleared the table and washed the cups. The door opened again. The bell rang. The man who walked in yesterday. He wore a different, cleaner coat, but his eyes were the same. His gaze was deep and calm, somehow grateful and wary. Maya felt her heart sink. She nodded slightly, like a regular, black coffee. Same, no sugar. She poured the coffee and set the cup down on the table, without adding a piece of paper this time. He took the cup and said softly, "Thank you. The coffee here's better than I remembered." She smiled, because I roast the beans more carefully than everyone else. They were silent for a moment. Outside, a light rain was falling. Ethan asked, "How long have you worked here?" 3 years. "Do you like it here?" "I like the quiet." The answer was short, but there was something else in her eyes, a little defensive, a little sad. Ethan looked at her and spoke slowly. "You gave me the paper yesterday. I read it." Maya looked up, her eyes meeting his. "And you believed me I did, but I want to know why." She was silent. The rain pounded on the tin roof. She didn't want to lie, but telling the truth was too dangerous. "Finally," she whispered, "because I know what the eyes of someone who is being watched look like." Ethan didn't ask any more. He looked at her longer, as if trying to understand the woman standing before him. She was calm, steady, but her eyes held old wounds. He put some bills on the table and stood up. "Thanks for the warning. I owe you a favor." She smiled faintly. "I didn't do it for you. I did it because I didn't want to see another person disappear." Ethan nodded slightly and walked out of the shop. The door closed and a bell rang softly. Maya watched, filled with a mixture of emotions, fear, curiosity, and perhaps a fragile hope that everything would be okay. She returned to her work, washing glasses, wiping tables, and cleaning as usual. But this time her hands were shaking slightly. Outside, the fog thickened, and the black pickup appeared around the corner again. Maya took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. She knew the game wasn't over. It had only just begun. The morning in Harbor was slower than usual. The sky was still foggy, but light filtered through the coastal pines and reflected off the puddles that had formed on the sidewalks. Regulars had arrived at Harbor Brew, ordered their regular coffee, exchanged a few words, and left. Maya Brooks was at work as usual, but her mind was not there. Every doorbell, every engine sound outside made her heart skip a beat. She kept looking out the window, where the black pickup truck was usually parked. Today, it was gone. Instead, there was an old silver sedan with an unfamiliar license plate. When the clock on the wall struck 8:30, Ethan Ward walked in again. He was still in his simple brown coat, his cap in hand, his gait leisurely, but his eyes alert. She didn't ask anything, and he didn't say anything. Just two acquaintances in silence, strangers who understood each other better than anyone else. Ethan sat at the old table in the corner. Maya placed a cup of black coffee in front of him. Their eyes met for a moment. Then she turned away and continued wiping the counter, as if nothing had happened between them. But Ethan didn't drink. He looked at his coffee, then around. At the table near the door, there was a young man reading a newspaper. His face was so plain it was hard to remember, but his hands were too strong for an office worker. It was a small detail, but to Ethan, it was enough to make him wary. He took the paper from the day before out of his pocket and smoothed the creased edges. The handwriting was smooth, slanted slightly to the right, familiar to those who had learned traditional handwriting in the South. It was the handwriting of a meticulous, educated person, someone like Maya. Ethan folded it and tucked it carefully into his wallet. He was about to ask her, but something stopped him. Maybe it was the fear in her eyes, or the way she always checked her rearview mirror when she opened the door to the shop. A strong wind blew, making the curtains sway slightly. Maya looked outside, then frowned slightly. The silver sedan had just started its engine, driving slowly towards the beach. She felt strange. The person did not order a drink, just sat for a while and then left. She turned, meeting Ethan's gaze. He didn't say anything, but his slight nod was enough to tell her he saw it too. Just as the atmosphere was tense, the laughter from the group of students who entered brought everything back to normal. Maya smiled as she served them, as if nothing was weighing on her mind, but deep inside, she was calculating. 10 minutes later, when the group of students left, Maya approached Ethan's table and asked quietly, "The coffee is cold. Do you want more?" "Yes. Please, give me some more." When she brought him a new cup, Ethan noticed a folded napkin under the saucer. He unfolded it. It was written in small, quickly smeared letters, "Don't look around. Someone's in the kitchen." Ethan kept his face impassive. He lifted his coffee cup, as if savoring the aroma, but in his mind, he had already mapped out all the exits. There were only two, one to the main road, the other to the back storage room, near the cold room. Maya's voice rang out softly. "How long have you lived here?" "Just arrived. Planning to stay for a few days. Harbor is quiet, but not everyone likes this quiet." Ethan smiled and replied, "Maybe I need that quiet." She nodded and left. Her words sounded casual, but in his ears, they sounded like a warning. A few minutes later, a small sound came from behind the counter, the sound of the kitchen door opening and closing. Ethan glanced in the mirror behind him and saw the silhouette of a tall man in a gray coat without an employee badge. Maya walked out shortly after, holding a tray of cakes, her face still calm. She placed the cakes on the shelf, then approached Ethan's table, speaking softly, her voice barely a breath. "When I knock my glass twice, you leave. Out the back door. Don't come back." Ethan looked at her, his eyes as if he wanted to ask something, but she turned away. 2 minutes later, the sound of glasses clinking sounded. 1, 2. Ethan stood up slowly, like someone leaving a bar, but as he reached the back door, he heard footsteps in the kitchen. A man's voice rang out, hoarse and cold. "Are you Maya Brooks?" Maya stopped, turned around, a faint smile on her lips. "Are you a delivery man?" "Yes, but today I don't have any deliveries. I have questions." Ethan didn't look back. He opened the back door and walked out into the alley behind the shop. It was drizzling. He kept his head down and walked quickly. From inside, he heard a loud noise, like glass breaking. Then silence. Ethan stopped, his heart pounding. He wanted to turn back, but remembered what she said. He pulled out his phone, about to call the police, but stopped. In places like this, the police weren't always the ones to help. He walked toward the small path that led to the beach, thinking, who was that girl? How did she know he was being followed and who was looking for her? The strong sea breeze blew against his face, carrying the taste of salt. He stopped at the old dock, sat down on a wooden bench, took out the paper and read it again. "Don't look back. Someone is following you. Someone went into the kitchen. 2 pieces of paper, 2 times saved him from danger." He knew clearly. This could not be a coincidence. Ethan pulled out a small photo from his wallet. It showed him and a few of his old colleagues. In the background was the Ward Tech headquarters building. He remembered the day he left everything behind, when he discovered secrets within his own company. Someone had betrayed him, forced him to disappear. And now this strange woman knew. A train whistle sounded in the distance. Ethan looked up, out at the misty sea. The question lingered in his mind. Who really was Maya Brooks, and what did she want from him back at the cafe? Maya sat alone in the kitchen. The broken glass lay on the floor, the shards reflecting the pale light. The man in gray had left after a few vague threats. She knew it wouldn't end there. She sighed and opened her phone. A message from an unknown number appeared. "You should stop interfering if you want to live." She looked at the message for a long time, then deleted it. No reply. Outside, the wind chimes jingled softly in front of the shop door. The sea breeze blew, carrying with it the cold, salty scent. Maya leaned against the wall and closed her eyes. She knew the game had truly begun. And this time, she wasn't just saving a stranger, she was saving herself. The harbor nights were always special. The color of the sea mist mixed with the yellow lights of the houses along the shore. When the wind blew through the pine trees, it sounded like the whispers of old spirits. It was a sound that reminded one of the past, the one Maya had tried to bury for the past 3 years. After her shift, Maya left Harbor Brew and walked down the small street toward her second-floor apartment at the used bookstore. She walked slowly, hands in her pockets, listening to the ocean breeze and the sound of her shoes on the wet pavement. Each step seemed to take her back to years she had tried to forget, before she became a waitress in this small town. Maya Brooks was an investigative reporter in Boston, a name that was often mentioned on the local news. She was known for her toughness, her fearlessness, and her habit of never backing down from a question, even if it made others uncomfortable. She believed in the truth. She believed that if people could look the truth in the face, they would do the right thing. But that belief was crushed in the fall 3 years ago. Maya and her father, Samuel Brooks, a veteran journalist for the Boston Ledger, were investigating the chemical corporation Haven Industries. They learned that the company had dumped thousands of gallons of toxic waste into the Merrimack River, sickening hundreds of people. Her father once said, "Daughter, If I don't speak, who will? If the truth is not written down, it will disappear. Maya still remembers the night their apartment was broken into. The door wasn't broken, but all the documents, the computer, the hard drive, everything was gone. Her father called the police, but no one investigated. 2 weeks later, he disappeared on his way home. The car was found by the river. No one was inside. The police called it an accident. She called it a warning. After her father disappeared, Maya continued her investigation. She found new evidence, a copy of a contract between Haven and a subsidiary called Wardtech Energy. That name later helped her understand why Ethan Ward had caught her attention. Before the article could be published, the editor called her in. His voice was cold as steel. "Maya, you need to stop. They're not just threatening your career. They know where you are. They know your mother is sick. They know everything." She threw her press card on the table, left the office, and walked out into the freezing rain. From that moment on, Maya Brooks disappeared from Boston. She sold her car, changed her phone number, and moved to Harbor, a small coastal town where no one cared who she was. She got a job at a coffee shop and rented a small room on the second floor. She had planned to stay for only a few months, but those months turned into years. She stopped writing. She stopped reading the news. She stopped turning on the TV. Every morning she made coffee, set the table, listened to customers tell their stories, but never her own. Sometimes, on sleepless nights, she would lie staring at the ceiling, listening to the waves, and remember her father. Remember what he had said. The truth never dies. Maya, it only waits for someone brave enough to tell it. She had wanted to forget, but then, yesterday, when she saw Ethan Ward, all those memories came back like waves crashing onto the shore. She knew who he was as soon as he walked through the door, even though he had shaved, changed his hairstyle, and hidden his identity behind a simple jacket. She could not forget those eyes that had appeared on the cover of Forbes magazine. She could not forget. Ethan Ward, founder of Wardtech Energy, a corporation that had once worked secretly with Haven Industries, and now he was being watched. The only question in Maya's mind was, why was he here? She recalled what she had read. After her father's disappearance, rumors circulated that Wardtech was under internal investigation for financial misconduct. Ethan Ward had suddenly disappeared, leaving the reins to a new group of shareholders. No one knew where he went. No one dared to ask. Now he appears in Harbor, a remote town that is nothing special but quiet. Maya entered the apartment and turned on the light. The room was small, just enough for a bed, an old wooden desk, a bookshelf, and a window overlooking the ocean. On the desk was a tin box containing a few remnants of her past a pen, her old press card, and a photograph of her father. She sat down, opened the box, and took out the card. The words, "Boston Ledger, Maya Brooks, investigative reporter," were still clear. She turned it over and saw her father's handwritten words. "The truth has no price, but the one who speaks the truth must pay." She looked at the words for a long time, then folded them up. The phone vibrated. A strange message. "We know what you did. Don't interfere in things that don't belong to you." She sighed. The familiar feeling returned. Fear mixed with determination. Outside, the rain began to fall. Drops tapped steadily against the window. Maya stood up, pulled back the curtains, and looked down the street. Under the yellow light, she saw the silhouette of a man standing on the corner, smoking, not sheltered from the rain. Her heart was beating fast. She stepped back and turned off the light. In the darkness, she could still see the red glow of the cigarette flickering, dying, then coming back on. She knew what it meant. They had found her. She pulled out her phone and quickly texted the anonymous number she had contacted while investigating Haven. "I think they found me. Message sent." She waited. 5 minutes, 10 minutes. No response. Maya sat down on the bed, clutching her father's photograph. His voice echoed in her head, deep and steady. "Don't let them silence you." She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. The fear melted into an old but strong determination. She knew that perhaps this was the time to give up. If Ethan Ward is truly being hunted, perhaps he is seeking the truth just as she is. And if two people who have lost everything for the truth meet in the same town, perhaps fate is unfolding a second time. Outside, the thunder faded away, the rain stopped. Only the sound of the waves lapping the shore remained, steady as a heartbeat. Maya stood up, poured herself a glass of water, and looked in the mirror. The woman in the mirror had different eyes, the same eyes, but deeper now, more determined. She knew she had to choose. Stay hidden, or return to her old path, the path that would cost her everything, but was also the only path that would make her feel like she was living. That night, in her small room in Harbor, Maya Brooks stayed up until morning, and in the misty dawn the next day, she decided if the past was coming to find her, she would not run any more. Friday morning in Harbor was strangely quiet. The sky was clear, the breeze was light, and the sea sparkled in the early morning sun. The peaceful atmosphere made everyone in town feel more relaxed, except for one person, Maya Brooks. She arrived at the shop early as usual, but her heart was heavy. She had hardly slept last night. She could still see the image of the man standing outside the window, his red cigarette flickering in the rain. As she was wiping the counter, the door opened and Ethan Ward walked in. He was wearing a heavier coat and looked like he had walked a long way. He smiled slightly, the polite yet slightly weary smile of someone who has been through a lot. Maya nodded. Black coffee, usual, yes. No sugar, no cream. I was beginning to think you didn't know what sweetness was. Ethan smiled, more genuinely this time. Believe me, I know. But too much sweetness makes people forget the bitterness. She looked at him, her eyes slightly sad. Perhaps she understood that better than anyone. When Maya brought out the coffee, the shop was not yet crowded. The early morning light shone through the window, covering Ethan's face with a pale yellow light like the dust of time. He looked out to sea and spoke softly, his voice even and deep. "Do you ever feel like you're living in a movie that no one is watching?" Maya looked a little surprised. "What you mean when you do everything right, but no one knows, no one cares?" She fell silent, put the napkin down on the table. Then she spoke slowly, clearly. "Yes, every day. But if we only live for others to see, who will live for themselves?" Ethan looked at her, his eyes softening. His gaze was no longer wary, but truly listening. A group of customers walked in, breaking the silence. Maya returned to her work. Ethan remained there, watching her, as if trying to record her every move, her quick gait, her sure gestures, her tired yet determined gaze. After a while, when the place emptied, he ordered another cup. She sat down at the table opposite, a rare occurrence. "What are you looking for at Harbor?" she asked softly. "Peace. There's nothing much here but quiet. That's enough. She smiled slightly. You know, in this town, people measure life by cups of coffee. Everyone thinks they just want peace, but really, everyone is running from something. Ethan looked at her longer. And you? What are you running from? The question made her freeze. A breeze blew in from the window, making the curtains flutter. She looked out to sea, avoiding his eyes. Maybe I didn't hide. I just chose to stay still. Ethan nodded slightly, as if he understood. I used to have it all. Company, money, reputation. But then I realized sometimes standing still is the only way to see clearly. Everything around me is falling apart. She turned to look at him. He spoke like a man who had lost much. I lost faith, but thanks to that, I began to hear the things I had missed. At that moment, no one said another word. The sound of the waves outside, the steady ticking of the clock. Something vague arose between the two people, a connection that needed no words, only feelings. Mrs. Helen came out of the kitchen, saw the scene, glanced at it and smiled. You two are having a good time. Yes. This guest has a way of telling stories that makes people forget the time. Ethan stood up and paid. As he walked to the door, Maya called after him, Ethan, if you go along the beach today, don't go past the wooden bridge. It's dangerous there, especially in the afternoon. He stopped, looked at her over his shoulder, his eyes both grateful and suspicious. You know that because I've seen people fall down there and never come back. Ethan nodded and left. The door closed and the bell rang softly. Maya stood there for a long moment, looking at the unfinished cup of coffee on the table, then slowly cleared away. That afternoon, when the tavern was empty, she walked along the beach. There were fresh footprints in the sand. Maybe they were his. She wasn't sure. The wind blew harder, and the smell of salt was stronger. She stopped, looking toward the wooden bridge she had warned about. There, 3 years ago, her father's wallet was found. No one knew where he went. No one found his body. And from that day on, she never crossed that bridge again. She sat down on the sand, watching the rippling water. Ethan's image appeared in her mind, the man with listening eyes that had seen so much loss but still had a touch of kindness. A strange feeling crept into her heart, not love, but a deep sympathy. Two people, two lives, hurt by the same thing, the hidden truth. At night. Maya returned to the shop. Helen had locked the door. She took out her key and went inside. She didn't turn on the lights. She sat down at Ethan's table that morning and unfolded the white napkin. She wrote a few lines, then folded it up. I know you didn't come here just to find peace. If you really want the truth, meet me at the wooden bridge tomorrow morning before sunrise. She put the paper in an envelope, wrote his name in small handwriting, and tucked it in the menu so that when he arrived tomorrow morning, Mrs. Helen would accidentally give it to him. She looked around the shop. Everything was familiar and peaceful. But in her heart, she knew, after tomorrow morning, everything would change. She stood up, left the cafe, and walked slowly down the cobblestone street. Above, the harbor sky was strewn with stars. A cold wind blew through her hair, carrying the scent of salt and coffee from her clothes. In the dim moonlight, Maya's eyes shone with something she had long lost: courage. The next morning, Harbor was shrouded in a thick fog. The sea was so calm you could hear the paddles hitting the water from the far shore. The cobblestone path to the wooden bridge was knee-deep in fog. Ethan Ward stood there, hands in his coat pockets, breathing deeply. He was early. It was cold, his breath steaming white. He looked out at the hazy sea, where the weak sunlight was trying to penetrate the mist. He wasn't sure what he was doing. Part of him trusted Maya Brooks, the woman with the sad, tough eyes. Part of him remained wary. Trust was a rare luxury for someone who had been betrayed by those closest to him. He heard footsteps behind him. Maya appeared, wearing a thick sweater, her hair tied back. She looked calm, but her eyes were deep and tired. She stopped beside him, looking out to sea. "You came early? I couldn't sleep?" She nodded slightly. The two of them stood side by side, saying nothing more. The wind blew harder, blowing strands of her hair lightly into the air. After a moment, Maya spoke. "I think you should know this. Haven Industries is still in business, but it's hidden away in a web of subsidiaries. I believe Ward Tech used to have a stake in it. Right?" Ethan was silent. He stared off into the distance, as if searching the ocean for answers. "Yes, but I left Ward Tech 3 years ago. When I found out they were funding Haven-related projects, I wanted out. The board said no, and then I disappeared." Maya turned and looked at him, her eyes serious. "They won't let you live, and I think they've tracked you down." Ethan sighed. "I know, but I need proof. I can't just tell my story. I have to prove it. And you want me to help? I think you know more than you say." She didn't answer. A large wave crashed against the side of the bridge, splashing them both back. The air between them was thick. She bowed her head, her voice low. "I investigated Haven. My father died because of them. He was going to release documents proving Haven's connection to Ward Tech, but he disappeared before he could. I kept some of the data." Ethan looked at her, his eyes suddenly changing. "You have that data?" "Yes, but I don't know who to trust. I've kept it for too long." A car horn sounded in the distance, breaking the moment. They both turned. A silver truck was driving slowly down the dirt road leading down to the beach. The windows were dark, making it impossible to see who was inside. Maya's instincts told her something was wrong. She tugged Ethan's hand. "We should go." But before they could leave, the car stopped, its headlights on, shining directly at them. Ethan squinted. The door opened. 2 men in black coats got out, each with a walkie-talkie strapped to his ear. One of the 2 spoke coldly. "Ward, finally found you?" Ethan took a half-step back, Maya standing lightly in front of him. "Who are you?" she asked, trying to keep her composure. "We just want to talk," Ethan said softly, his voice low. "Don't trust them." The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Ward, your old company is worried about you. They just want to help you get back on track." Maya took a step forward. "If you really wanted to help, why did you come here with 2 people carrying walkie-talkies and an unmarked car?" The air suddenly became tense. The sea breeze seemed to stop. Ethan looked around. The road to town was blocked by the car. They had no way out. Ethan leaned close to Maya and whispered, "Do you trust me?" She did not hesitate. "Yes." "Then run." In a split second, he pushed her aside and kicked the nearest car door, sending the second man reeling. Maya sprinted down the hillside path. There was a scream, then a gunshot. She ducked, her heart pounding. The bullets ripped through the air, hitting a nearby plank. Ethan ran after her, his hand gripping her wrist, pulling her into the narrow path between the pine trees. They ran until they could no longer hear the car behind them. They both stopped, panting. Ethan leaned against a tree, his hands wet with blood. He was injured. Just a graze. She looked around. The path led to the old lighthouse. It had long been abandoned. We should hide there. They walked slowly, their breaths mingling with the morning mist. When they reached their destination, she helped him sit down on a rotten wooden chair and found a towel to bandage his wound. In the dim light, Ethan looked at her, his voice low. "You don't deserve to be involved in this. Maybe I was involved before I met you." He was silent. Only the sound of the waves and the wind howling through the cracks in the lighthouse door. After a moment, Maya said quietly, "I will show you that data, but if we do, neither of us will have a way out." Ethan looked up, his eyes no longer filled with fear, but with determination. "How many people like you and your father do you think Haven and Ward Tech have silenced if we don't speak up? They'll continue." She nodded, smiling slightly, a tired smile but with something brighter. "Then let's talk." The wind outside blew harder, banging on the lighthouse doors. Ethan looked out to sea. He knew that from this moment on, everything was different. He was no longer anonymous. Maya was no longer an ordinary waitress. Both have chosen to step into the danger zone, where truth and death are only a thin line apart. The night passed in silence. The waves lapped steadily against the cliffs below the old lighthouse. The dim light of dawn crept through the cracks in the door, illuminating Maya's face. She sat on the wooden floor, her back against the wall, her arms hugging her knees. Her eyes were still open. She hadn't slept a minute. Ethan Ward sat by the window, the dim light illuminating his face. He had bound the wound, but his hands were still stained with dried blood. The air smelled of rust, salt, and lingering fear. Both of them remained silent for several hours. Needless to say, they understood that silence was the only way to keep calm at this moment. The sun was rising, the first rays of light reflecting off the ocean. Maya took a deep breath and stood up. She pulled a carefully folded piece of paper from her coat pocket. It was old, with frayed edges and smudged ink in places. Ethan looked at her, not asking. He knew the paper was important. Maya opened it, her voice as soft as a breath of wind. "This is the only copy left from my father's investigation. I've kept it for 3 years." Ethan stood quietly and approached. The paper had the Haven Industries logo in the top corner, and in small print below it, Confidential Partnership Agreement, Blue Water Project. Below that was a list of the parties involved. The first name made him stop. Ward Tech Energy. Ethan clenched his fists. He looked at Maya, his voice low. "I never signed this contract. I believe you. But the signature here is yours." Ethan looked closely. It was his signature, so perfect it was almost indistinguishable, but he knew full well it was a fake. He recalled the last meetings before he left the company. He had opposed the expansion into chemical processing, suspecting irregularities in the supply chain. The board overruled him, and just weeks later, the Green Water Project was announced. They said it was an environmental initiative. Now he understood. Maya continued. This project was presented as a water reclamation program, but it was actually a cover for controlled discharge. They bribed the media, falsified test results. When my father tried to publicize the truth, he disappeared. Ethan sat down gently on the old wooden chair, his forehead resting on his hands. So it was all prearranged. Maya looked at him, her eyes hurt and bright. "You see, I've been hiding for 3 years, carrying this paper with me. But yesterday, when I saw you, I knew I could not keep it forever." Ethan looked up. "What are you going to do with it? Announce. But not alone. I can't do it. I need influencers." Ethan looked out the window, the morning light reflecting off his face. "If I go back, they will destroy me before I open my mouth. But there is one person." He paused, then continued. "There's a freelance writer named Avery Holt. I used to sponsor her paper. She dares to write things others don't dare. If we can get to her, we have a chance." Maya looked at him, silent for a few seconds. "Avery Holt? I know that guy. She wrote an article about Haven once, but it was taken down after an hour." Ethan nodded. She was the one they feared the most. The air in the lighthouse suddenly grew warmer. A small ray of hope appeared in the thick fog of despair. But their hopes were cut short when they heard the distant sound of a car engine. The roar of the engine echoed in the silence. Maya ran to the window and parted the curtains. At the foot of the hill, 2 black cars were approaching. She turned back, her voice low but firm. "They found us." Ethan stood up, his eyes changing, calm, sharp. "We have to go now." Maya tucked the paper into her coat pocket and pulled him out the back door. The path behind the lighthouse led down the cliff and into the forest path. They ran, their footsteps drowning out the sound of the waves. As they neared the woods, a car horn sounded, then shouts echoed. Someone was chasing them. Ethan said in a gasp, "Do you have somewhere safe?" "Yes. An abandoned house at the end of the woods, where I hid when I first came to Harbor." They ran on, past the dew-dampened trees. When they reached the small wooden house, Maya unlocked the old lock. The door clicked like a memory awakened. The inside was dusty, but some of the old furniture was still intact. They entered and locked the door. Maya opened the cupboard and took out a wooden box containing a small hard drive wrapped in cloth. "This is not just a piece of paper," she said. "All of my father's data is in here. I encrypted it, but I can't open it." Ethan walked over and looked at the hard drive. "I know someone who can, but before we contact you, we have to get out of town." Maya smiled bitterly. "It won't be easy to get out of Harbor. All roads are blocked. Then we go by sea." She looked at him, surprised. "You can sail more than that. I lived at sea for 2 years after I disappeared. It was the only place I felt free." She was silent for a few seconds, then nodded. "The old dock is half a mile away. We'll leave after dark." They sat down and waited. The wind blew through the cracks in the door. The sound of a heartbeat mixed with the sounds of the forest. Ethan looked at Maya, his voice low and sincere. "You know, when I was at Ward Tech, I thought I was saving the world with clean technology, but really, I was just painting over the wounds we made." Maya looked at him, her eyes softening. "Now you can really save it, not with money, but with the truth." Ethan smiled, a small but genuine smile. Maybe she was right. Outside, a car engine stopped, a door opened, then voices. They were getting closer. Maya clutched the hard drive in her hand, her eyes on the pale light outside the window. In her heart, there was no longer fear, only faith. A small but powerful faith that, perhaps this time, they could fight and win justice for her father, for themselves, and for all those who had been silenced. The air in the cabin became thick. Footsteps echoed outside, heavy and determined. Ethan gently pulled Maya against the wall. The dim light from the crack in the door illuminated her face, calm, but her eyes could not hide the tension. She motioned for him to be quiet. They both held their breaths. Outside, a man's voice rang out, low and cold. "They must be around here. Check every house." Ethan looked around the small room. The back window was blocked by a wooden shelf, the front door the only way out. He spoke softly, his voice hoarse. "You go first. I'll hold them off." Maya shook her head and whispered, "If you stay, they will get you first. Let's go together." Ethan was about to say something, but she grabbed his hand and led him to the small side window. She gently moved the rotten boards, making enough room for them to slip through. As they slipped through, the front door swung open. Over here, someone shouted. Gunshots rang out. Bullets whizzed past the wooden walls. Maya and Ethan ran into the woods, footsteps following close behind. Dry leaves crunched underfoot, each step akin to their heartbeats. Maya led Ethan down a small, bushy path that led to a cliff overlooking the ocean. The wind blew hard, carrying the smell of salt and the sound of rough waves. She turned, gasping. There's no way. Ethan looked down the cliff. Below was the rock, about 20 feet lower. "We have to jump." Maya looked at him in disbelief. "Are you crazy?" "No, but if we stay, they will kill us both." There was no time to discuss. Behind her, another shot rang out. Maya took his hand, closed her eyes, and they jumped together. The water was cold as a knife. When she surfaced, Ethan was beside her, breathing hard. They swam toward the old dock, the place he had said would be their only escape. Maya was soaked and shaking as she climbed onto the pier. Ethan quickly found a small boat covered with a tarpaulin. He pulled the tarpaulin off and checked the engine. It still worked. She looked around, her breathing still labored. "Where are we going, Portland? I have someone who can help, but we have to go before they find this way." The engine started. The boat left the dock, cutting through the waves and heading out to sea. Harbor slowly receded behind, the lights of the small town fading like a memory. They sat in silence, listening only to the sound of the engine and the waves. The sea breeze blew across her face, cold, but something in Maya's heart was warmer than fear. Perhaps it was faith. "You know," Ethan said after a moment, his voice low and steady, "I thought I would die alone, silently, like someone forgetting an old news story. But meeting you reminded me that there are people who still believe in the right things, no matter how small." Maya did not turn around, just looked into the distance. "You are wrong. I once lost faith, but perhaps sometimes God brings us to meet others just to remind us that there is still a reason to stand up." The boat glided through the thick fog. Ethan looked at her, his eyes filled with something else, not just gratitude, but respect. He saw in her a reflection of himself, when he still believed that one person could change the world with a true story. Towards midnight, the wind changed direction. Dark clouds rolled in, and the sky became choppy. The sea roared as if it would swallow them. Waves crashed against the sides of the boat, and water lapped at the deck. Ethan gripped the steering wheel tightly. "Hold on." A huge wave came in, tossing the boat onto its side. Maya tried to grab the handrail, but the cold water rushed in and made her slip. Ethan reached out and pulled her up, holding her tight. Both were wet and shivering, but they managed to keep their balance. After the big wave, the sea calmed down, leaving only the sound of wind and breathing. Maya leaned against the boat's wall, breathing heavily. Have you ever thought, if you hadn't left Ward Tech that day, maybe things would have been different? Ethan looked away, his eyes heavy. If I hadn't left, I might have become like them. I left, but I didn't have the courage to correct my mistakes. And you dare to come back. I'm not sure I'm brave. I'm just tired of being scared. The words left him speechless. A gust of wind blew through, blowing a few pieces of paper Maya had kept in her pocket. She quickly caught them, but one fell to the floor, the one her father had written in his handwriting. Ethan bent down and picked it up. On it were shaky but clear words. If anyone finds this, remember, truth does not need acceptance to exist. She looked at those words, tears welling up in her eyes. For years, she had tried to keep herself cool, tried to forget, but now, just one sentence brought back all the memories: her father's smile, his voice, his hand on her shoulder whenever she felt discouraged. Ethan looked at her, his voice soft. He believed in you. And now, so do I. She smiled, her tears mixing with the sound of the waves. Then we will complete the rest of him. The sky ahead gradually cleared. The storm cleared, and the moonlight appeared. A silvery streak of light stretched across the sea like a guiding path. Ethan looked in that direction and said softly, "We'll get to Portland in a few hours. You rest. I'll drive." She nodded, resting her head on his shoulder. The waves continued to beat, rhythmic like breathing. In that moment, in the vast ocean, two people who had lost everything found something greater, faith and life. But they did not know that. Behind, in the darkness, another ship was also cutting through the waves following. No lights on, only a small red light on the deck. Harbor hasn't let them go yet. Portland was overcast when they docked. The city seemed asleep under a thick fog. The low-slung buildings reflected warm yellow light from their windows. The dock was deserted, except for a few seagulls circling. Ethan tied the boat to a wooden post, and Maya sat quietly, clutching the duffel bag containing the hard drive. She looked around. The sight was unfamiliar, but it did not frighten her. There was only one feeling: tired and determined. Ethan stepped forward, his voice low but firm. "We have to find Avery Holt before they get here. I know her office is on the east side of town, an old building near the press area." They left the dock and walked through the narrow streets. The streets were wet. Steam rose from the sewers. The smell of roasting coffee and smoke filled the air. Ethan wore his hat low. Maya walked close beside him. They were two shadows, moving unnoticed through a world that moved. After more than an hour, they stopped in front of an old brick building. A small, faded sign read, "The Portland Chronicle Independent Desk." The door was unlocked. They entered, and a small bell rang softly. Inside, the office was a mess: papers, tape recorders, maps, and cold coffee. A woman sat behind the desk, her blonde hair a mess, her eyes dark from staying up all night. When she looked up, her gaze was sharp and alert. "Who let you in here?" Ethan stepped forward, his voice low and calm. "Avery Holt." "Right. I'm Ethan Ward." She frowned. "Ethan Ward died 3 years ago." Maya spoke up. "He's alive, and we have what you need to prove Haven Industries and Ward Tech covered up the crime." Avery stood up, her eyes fixed on the two of them. She looked at Maya, then at Ethan. Finally, she spoke slowly. "I need a reason to trust you." Maya set the bag on the table and opened it. The hard drive, the forged signature, and a photo of her father standing next to the data pad. My father, Samuel Brooks. He went missing after investigating the Haven spill. I'm sure you've heard of him. Avery was silent for a moment. Then she nodded. Yes, he was the only one who ever sent me inside information before the gag. I tried to publish it, but it was taken down within the hour. The air in the room grew heavy. Ethan spoke, his voice low and controlled. They're hunting us. We need to get it out, now. Avery crossed his arms and looked straight ahead. I can't just trust words. I have to see the data. Maya nodded and handed her the hard drive. Avery plugged it into the computer and typed quickly on the keyboard. The screen lit up and a series of files appeared. She opened one titled Project Blue Water. On the screen was a detailed spreadsheet, the amount of chemical released, the area contaminated, and hundreds of patient names in the Merrimack area. At the bottom of the document was the text approved by E. Ward. Ethan stiffened, looking at the fake signature again. He whispered, "They used my name to legalize everything." Avery looked at him, his eyes softening. "I believe you, but this is too big. If we announce it without a plan, they will stifle the article before it gets out." Maya asked, "Do you have any other way?" Avery smiled slightly, but it was a tired smile. "Yeah, but it's dangerous. I have a friend who works at national television. If we broadcast live, they can't intercept the signal in time. But to get there, we have to pass through at least 2 checkpoints. And if they find out, we're done." Ethan looked at Maya. In that moment, they understood each other. No words needed to be said. Both were ready. Avery shut down the computer, pulled out the hard drive, and put it in a leather bag. "Let's go." As they left the building, the sound of an engine echoed down the street. A black SUV pulled up, its doors opening. Men in black coats got out, their eyes cold as steel. Ethan took Maya's hand and pulled her back into the alley. Avery led the way. They ran past the old houses and into the narrow street. Gunfire rang out behind them, bullets ricocheting off the brick walls. Maya ran, breathing heavily, her heart pounding. Ethan was right behind her, but he was slower. She turned and pulled him. "Come on, just a few more blocks." The 3 of them rushed into an underground parking lot. Avery pointed to a steel door at the end. Underground exit. They ran downstairs, their footsteps echoing in the dark space. As the door closed, the sounds of cars and people above faded. Inside the cellar, a few old bulbs cast a dim light. Ethan sat down, breathing heavily. Maya knelt beside him, touching his shoulder. "Are you okay?" He nodded. "I'm fine. We have to go to the TV station." Avery pulled out his phone and dialed a quick number. "Rick, it's me. Prepare for an emergency broadcast. No one leaves the engineering room. I have something that will make the whole country listen." She hung up and looked at the 2 of them. "It's about 20 minutes from here to the station. But if they follow, we won't make it." Maya took a deep breath and spoke softly but firmly. "We have no other choice." Ethan looked at her, then at Avery. Between them, there was no longer any line between rich and poor, between journalist and billionaire, just 3 people with one belief. The rain outside began to fall harder. The thunder faded away, followed by flashes of light in the night. Maya gripped the doorknob tightly, looking at the 2 of them. "Let's go." They left the tunnel, ran through the rain, and through the dark streets. The sound of car horns, loudspeakers, and thunder harmonized into the violent music of the waking city. Ahead, the lights of the TV building blazed in the storm. Maya looked up, the rain running down her cheeks. In that moment, she understood. All her fears, all her losses, had led her here where the truth would never be buried again. Rain poured down on Portland. The sky was ashen gray, and the city lights reflected off the wet pavement, turning everything into a shimmering ribbon. Ethan, Maya, and Avery ran through the rain, each heavy step dragging the past behind them. The TV station building loomed ahead, tall, dark, and strangely silent. The PTN Channel 7 logo flashed on the roof. Avery gasped, speaking quickly. "Back entrance. The night guard is my man. If we're lucky, he'll still be on duty." They turned into a narrow alley between two buildings, where the streetlights didn't reach. The metal door appeared, damp and cold. Avery knocked 3 short times, then 2 long times. Inside, a deep voice said, "Who's there, Holt? I have big news." The door opened slightly. A middle-aged man in a security guard uniform looked out. His eyes filled with suspicion. When he saw Avery, he frowned slightly. "You should know you're playing with fire." "I know, but this time, fire is the only thing that can illuminate the truth." The man sighed and opened the door. "Go ahead, quickly. I have never seen anyone." The building was strangely quiet. The only sound was the rain hitting the windows. They walked down the long hallway and up the narrow stairs to the third-floor engineering room. Avery opened the door and turned on the lights. The blue glow from the rows of monitors made the room look like the beating heart of the city. Rick, the technician Avery had called earlier, was sitting at the console. When he saw them, he stood up. "Ms. Holt, you really want to go live?" "Yes, and we don't have much time." Rick glanced at Ethan and Maya. Recognizing his face from old newspaper photos, his mouth fell open. "My God, Mr. Ward, I thought you were dead." Ethan only said briefly, "No, but if we fail today, I will really die." Avery put the bag on the table and took out the hard drive. "Rick, I need you to prepare a backup line. If they try to cut the signal, push the signal to the backup server in Seattle." "Yes, but I know they'll be here soon. I just saw 2 black cars parked outside." Avery looked at Ethan and Maya. "We have to start now." Maya sat down at the microphone, her hands shaking slightly. She looked at the picture of her father on the computer screen that Avery had left. Beneath it, the simple words, "Samuel Brooks, the journalist who never silenced." Avery said, his voice clear and cold as steel. "We're broadcasting in 3, 2, 1. The red light turns on. The camera starts rolling. Avery began in a calm but commanding voice. "This is Avery Holt, an independent reporter for the Portland Chronicle. Today, we're releasing never-before-seen information about Haven Industries and WardTech Energy, 2 corporations responsible for one of the worst environmental disasters in American history." Maya took a deep breath, holding the paper with a slight tremble. Her voice rang out, slow but firm. 3 years ago, my father, journalist Samuel Brooks, investigated and discovered that Haven Industries had dumped thousands of gallons of chemicals into the Merrimack River, sickening hundreds of people. When he was about to publish it, he disappeared. This is the last record he left behind. On the screen, Avery opened the Project Blue Water file. The text, the numbers, and Ethan Ward's forged signature were clearly visible. She turned the camera toward him. "And this is the person whose signature they forged, Mr. Ethan Ward, founder of WardTech Energy. Ethan looked straight into the camera. His face was cold, but there was fire in his eyes. I knew nothing about this project. They used my name to legitimize the crime. I believed I was saving the planet with clean technology, but in fact, I was just covering up something worse. Today, I speak out not to save myself, but to say the truth can be buried, but never dead. The control room was silent. Rick watched the broadcast timer. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3. No one intervened. Avery continued. We have evidence of collusion between many officials in hiding pollution data. All documents will be published on an open server immediately after this program. Maya added, her voice breaking. My father once wrote, "The truth does not need to be accepted to exist." I believe him, and today, I believe the people deserve to know. There was a loud noise in the hallway. Rick turned around. They're here. Avery motioned for him to lock the door. Outside, heavy footsteps and the knocking grew louder. Ethan said quickly, "How long will it take for the data to download?" Rick checked the screen. 90%. They're trying to block the connection. But I'm still holding on. Avery gripped the microphone tightly and continued speaking, her voice no longer shaking. If you are watching this show, please share it. Don't let them erase the truth. The door burst open. 2 men in black coats rushed in, shouting, "Stop the broadcast!" Rick pressed the final data lock button. The screen flashed, and the words "Upload complete" appeared. Ethan stepped in front of the camera, his voice ringing out one last time. You can shut us down, you can shut us up, but it's too late. The truth is out. There was a loud bang. The camera fell. The image shook and then went dark. An hour later, across the country, news sites and social media sites picked up the less than 5-minute live broadcast. The hashtag Blue Water Truth trended. Merrimack residents took to the streets. International media picked up the story. In a narrow alley in North Portland, an old car sat quietly. Inside, Maya opened her eyes. She felt the burn on her arm, but she could still breathe. Ethan sat in the driver's seat, his shirt torn, his arm bandaged. Avery was in the back seat, his face bruised but smiling. Ethan looked at Maya. We did it. She nodded, tears mingling with the rain. No, we're just getting started. On Avery's phone, millions of views added up by the second. The comments streamed nonstop. And amid the storm of the virtual world, a small light shone through a light of justice, of truth, of people standing up. The sky was lightening after a rainy night. Portland's first rays of sunlight filtered through the frosted glass, reflecting off the water-soaked streets. The city still seemed sleepy, but somewhere, people were already talking about the midnight broadcast, the video that millions watched before it was taken down, in a small boarding house near the suburbs. Maya woke to the sound of birds outside the window. The room was simple, with only a bed, a wooden table, and a few cracks in the wall. She sat up, feeling the wound on her arm still sting. Across the room, Ethan sat in front of the window, looking out. The sunlight shone on his face, showing the lines of fatigue, but his eyes were bright, deep, and calm. "Aren't you sleeping?" Maya asked, her voice hoarse from the long night. Ethan smiled slightly. "No way. I probably haven't felt this alive in years." Maya was silent, looking at him. There was something about his expression that moved her, the serenity of someone who had weathered a storm and yet remained standing. Avery walked in, a steaming mug of coffee in his hand. Good news or bad news? Do you want to hear it first? Ethan turned back. Bad news. I've had enough. The bad news is, they're after us. The police have an arrest warrant for unauthorized access to the national system. And of course, Haven Industries denies all charges. Any good news? Maya asked. Avery smiled tiredly. The good news is that our broadcast video was copied over 10 million times in 12 hours. They can delete the original, but they can't delete the entire internet. No one said anything more. The three just looked at each other, silent. The truth was out, but they knew the road ahead would not be easy. Ethan stood up, walked to the table, and looked at the small photo Avery had just printed out, a photo of Maya's father, Samuel Brooks, smiling kindly in front of the old newspaper office. He whispered, "He would be proud of you." Maya. She looked at the photo, then bowed her head. My father once said, "One cannot choose which truth to tell. Once one knows, one can only move on." There was a long pause. Then Ethan continued, his voice low. "I had a chance to stop this from happening, but I was afraid of losing everything, my company, my reputation, my power. Sometimes I think I should have died in silence." Maya turned and looked at him for a long time. "No, the dead cannot be undone. Courage is not in never making mistakes, but in standing up when you are wrong." He looked at her and nodded slightly. "Thank you. That meant more than anything I had ever had." Avery put down his coffee cup and looked out the window, where the rain had stopped. "I heard the FBI is going to open an official investigation. We'll probably get Haven Industries charged in the next few days, but until then, they won't leave us alone." Ethan gripped the arms of his chair. "So what do we do next?" "We wait," Avery replied, "and hope justice does not sleep." In the afternoon, Maya walked to the banks of the Merrimack River, the river her father had written about, poisoned by what humans called progress. The water was clearer now, but not completely clean. She sat down on the grass, watching the water flow quietly, thinking about it all. Ethan came later, 2 cups of coffee in his hands. He handed her one and sat down beside her. "I've been here before, many years ago. When I thought I was doing great things, I was proud to see this river. Now, you can still start over," Maya said softly. "The truth can make you lose, but it can also make you free." Ethan looked at her, his eyes softening. "You're so much like him, the way you talk and the way you look at him." She smiled softly, her eyes brimming with tears. "He taught me that sometimes kindness is the only thing left when everything else falls apart." The two sat still, listening to the sound of waves lapping against the shore. The evening light fell, casting a soft golden light on the river's surface. That evening, they returned to the motel. Avery was watching the news on TV. The reporter was speaking rapidly. According to inside sources, the CEO of Haven Industries was arrested at the airport this morning. A federal court has ordered a full investigation into the Blue Water project. Meanwhile, the live video broadcast is becoming a symbol of the Speak the Truth movement, calling on people to stand up and demand transparency. The sound lit up the room. Maya looked at Ethan. He smiled a small smile, his first real smile in years. "Maybe, finally, the storm is over," he said. Avery turned off the TV and turned back. "The storm is over, but the wounds remain. The question is, what do we do about it?" Maya thought, then spoke slowly. "I will continue to write, not for my father, but for those who have no voice." Ethan looked at her, his eyes full of trust. "And I will return to Ward Tech, not to take back power, but to fix it. Perhaps it is time for those who made mistakes to fix it themselves." The room fell silent, but it was a different kind of silence, not of fear, but of peace. Outside, Portland lights came on, cafes opened, street music played softly. Maya stood by the window, watching the people go by. She thought of her father, of the rainy night, of Ethan's smile, and Avery's steady gaze. Something in her heart felt lighter, even though it still hurt. She spoke softly, almost loud enough for herself to hear. The truth does not end when it is spoken. It only begins to live when someone dares to keep it in their heart. Ethan heard and nodded. "You're right, and that's why I believe tomorrow will be better than yesterday." Outside, the wind carried the scent of freshly roasted coffee. Another morning would come, and life after the storm would go on. 3 weeks have passed since the night it aired. Portland is slowly returning to its old rhythm, but for those who witness the story, something will never be the same. That morning, Maya drove her old car back to her hometown, a small town on the Merrimack River where she was born and raised. The fields stretched out. The sky was wide. The sound of waves crashing in the distance made everything seem peaceful. But in her heart, the old pain still lingered. Her mother's house was on the edge of town. The porch was covered with moss. When Maya entered, Mrs. Brooks, a thin, silver-haired woman with bright eyes, was sitting on a wooden chair, mending an old woolen scarf. She looked up. Her eyes were quiet for a few seconds, then trembled slightly. "Maya, is that really you?" She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I'm home. Mom." They hugged each other. Neither of them said anything, just a silence in the old house where her father's memories still lingered. On the shelf was still the old typewriter, a few yellowed papers. "Mrs." Brooks looked at her daughter, her voice trembling but soft. "Your father. He always believed that the truth was the only way for people to be free. I was afraid that you would be like him, choose the lonely path. But I see you have found a companion." Maya smiled softly. "I'm not alone. Mom." She nodded, then looked out the window. Outside, the sunlight shone on the rice fields, and the wind blew, making everything brighter. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., Ethan Ward walked into the federal Capitol building. The white light reflected off the marble. He wore a black suit. No longer the man hiding in the small cafe, he was calm, step by step. Dozens of reporters stood in the hallway, cameras trained on him. His name was called repeatedly. "Mr. Ward. Do you regret it? Are you afraid of prosecution? Do you think Haven Industries will survive?" Ethan stopped in front of the podium, looking straight into the row of cameras. "I regret, but I will not hide. I'm willing to pay the price for those who have suffered while I remain silent. But today, I'm not here to defend myself. I'm here to say there will be no justice if we only blame others and do not change ourselves." The words echoed throughout the auditorium. Many were silent. Some bowed their heads. The entire nation watched the hearing. And, for the first time, a once anonymous billionaire spoke the truth not to justify himself, but to atone for his mistakes. After the hearing, Ethan stepped outside, the afternoon sun shining on his face. Avery waited outside, microphone in hand. "What do you think will change after today?" Ethan looked at her, smiling slightly. Maybe nothing will change right away, but if just one person believes that the truth is worth living for, that's enough to start." Avery was silent, not asking any more questions. She understood that some stories needed no further words. A few days later, Avery returned to her editing room. The walls were covered with articles, photos, and news stories about Haven. On her desk, her phone rang constantly calls, texts, interview requests, but she didn't answer. She opened her laptop and looked at a new note file titled "After the Storm Journey of Truth." She played an old recording, Maya's voice on the broadcast. The truth does not need to be accepted to exist. Avery listened again, her eyes misting. She whispered, and sometimes it needs someone to hold it. She began to write, not an investigative piece, but a story about the people Maya, Ethan, and Samuel Brooks who taught her that journalism is not just about reporting the news, but about telling the truth with heart. Late in the afternoon, Maya sat on the banks of the Merrimack River, its waters reflecting the setting sun. In her hand, she held her father's notebook, its faded writing. A figure approached. It was Ethan. He was still dressed simply, carrying only a small notebook and a white flower. "I came to say goodbye," he said. "I'm leaving for a while, probably to the lands Ward Tech once damaged, to make amends." Maya looked at him, her eyes quiet. "You don't have to go alone." Ethan smiled softly. "I need to. There are journeys people must take to find themselves. But I know you will continue on your father's path and ours." They stood there, looking at the river. The afternoon light reflected off the water like 1,000 shards of glass. They were both silent, but the silence was no longer heavy. It was peaceful. As Ethan left, Maya watched him until he disappeared behind the trees. She turned back and opened her father's notebook. The last line, written in hasty handwriting, read, "Someday, if you find the truth, let it be a light for others." She smiled and gently closed the book. In the sky, the clouds gradually parted, revealing a clear blue background, and Maya knew the storm in her heart had finally passed. A week later, Avery's article was on the front page of several major newspapers. A photo of Maya and Ethan standing by the river appeared with the headline, "They are not heroes. They are just people who chose the truth." The post was shared millions of times. But for Maya, that no longer mattered. She just wanted to live a peaceful life where the truth was respected, where people dared to face it, and where hope still existed. That evening, she sat in a small coffee shop, watching strangers smile, talk, and hold up newspapers with her picture on them. She no longer felt scared or lost. A young black woman approached, smiled, and whispered, "Thank you. Your story makes me believe that sometimes just one word can save a small world." Maya replied softly, "It wasn't me. It was the truth that did it." She looked out the window, where the light from the light-emitting drizzle was falling softly, and the emptiness in her heart was filled with faith, with peace, and with the memory of a father who had left light for the world. It was dusk in Montana. The sun was setting behind the snow-capped mountains, the last golden light falling on the small cabins scattered in the valley below. Ethan Ward stepped out of the old truck, his boots making a soft sound in the thin layer of snow. He'd been away from Portland for more than 2 weeks, traveling through the small towns where Ward Tech once operated. At each one, he'd stopped and talked to people, listened to their stories of disease, of discolored rivers, of stolen dreams. He didn't try to justify himself. He just listened, then helped fix roofs, rebuild wells, fund small clinics. In the evening, Ethan sat in front of the tent, lighting a fire. The firelight reflected on his face, older, but also kinder. He opened his notebook and wrote a few lines. Sometimes, light doesn't come from bright places, but from small people who still believe in what is right. I am learning how to be human again. The wind whistled through the ravine. He closed the book and looked up at the starry sky. Something in his heart felt at peace. Meanwhile, in Portland, Maya sat in her usual coffee shop. Outside, a light rain was falling. On the table was her laptop, half open an article she was completing for Truthline magazine after the storm, A Journey of Healing. The phone vibrated. A text message came in from an unknown number. Do you think Haven is really over? There's something you don't see in the data. She frowned, her heart racing. The message came with a link, but she didn't click it. She wrote down the address and turned off her phone. That night, Maya went to see Avery. Avery's office had been restored after the chase. New photos were on the walls, and a soft yellow light was cast on the desk. Avery frowned at Maya's message. Who sent it to you, I don't know, but if it is true, it's possible that Haven is still operating under another name. Avery thought, then spoke slowly. We need to verify, but this time we have to be more careful. They have lost everything, and there will be no more mercy. Maya nodded. I'm not afraid anymore. If the truth isn't complete, I can't stop here. Avery's eyes met hers, a mixture of pride and worry. Maya, sometimes the truth has a way of hurting the one who holds it. She smiled, a more mature smile than before. I know, but I'm not the shy waitress anymore. 3 days later, Avery received a tip from an old source. A new company called Undercover Energy, based in Nevada, had just acquired many of Haven Industries' assets, and the people behind it were none other than a group of former Ward Tech executives. Avery called Ethan immediately. It took a few minutes for the signal to connect. Ethan, we need you. There's something you need to know. His voice was hoarse from the other end of the line. I guess Haven isn't quite dead. No, they just changed their clothes, but this time we cannot fight alone. He was silent for a few seconds. I will come. The three met again at a small hotel in Reno. No more flashbulbs, no more cameras, just three people who had been through the storm, now sitting at a table, looking at each other like friends with the same fate. Avery spread out the source printouts. Here, Undercover Energy. Look at this. Same contract, same account number, just changed company name, and the final signature. Ethan picked up the paper. His eyes darkened. Robert Kane. Maya recalled. He was the vice president of Ward Tech, the person who opposed his public resignation from the company. Ethan nodded, his voice low. He never gave up power, and now he's using the same old system to revive Haven. The air in the room was thick. Avery put his hands on the table. This time, we'll do it differently. No broadcasts, no direct confrontations. We'll take the truth to the people who have the power to change the rules. Ethan looked at her, his eyes shining with hope. You mean Congress? Yes, I have friends on the Energy Committee. But we need absolute proof, Maya whispered. I have a way. She opened her laptop and showed the old backup file. When Haven uploaded the data to the server, there was a section of code that was locked. My father had noted in his notebook that the Blue Water Extended section contained evidence of a slush fund. If we could crack it, we would have enough to bring them down completely. Ethan looked at her, as if seeing Samuel Brooks in his daughter's eyes. We will. Avery smiled, though he was nervous. So, this will be the last chapter. That night, in her small room, Maya sat at her computer, lines of code appearing on the screen. Beside her, Ethan and Avery watched, the light from the screen reflected on their faces, the light of faith. A click sounded. The text appeared access granted. The file opens, containing a list of money transfers, official names, and a detailed plan titled Blue Water Continuum. Ethan clenched his fists. They never stopped, Maya said, her voice calm but trembling slightly. But this time, we are ready. Outside. The lights of Reno twinkled like the night sky. In that small room, 3 people faced the screen in silence where a faint light illuminated their faces. Not the light of glory, but of determination. Darkness still surrounded them, but this time they knew how to carry their own light. The Reno morning was sunny, but the air in the hotel room was heavy. Maya sat before the monitor, looking at the decrypted data. Each name, each amount, each signature appeared like blood on the page. She felt like she was looking into the very heart of darkness. Ethan stood behind, his hands on the shoulders of the chair, his eyes silent. He understood that this moment was not just the truth being revealed, but the point of no return. Avery walked to the window and pulled back the curtains. Light poured in, illuminating their faces. When we publish this data, they will do everything they can to silence us. Maya replied firmly, I know, but I'm not afraid anymore. Ethan smiled slightly, looking at her with quiet pride. You're more like your father than I thought. Avery turned back. We have 2 options: send the data directly to the House Energy Committee or release it through an independent network. One is legal, but slow. The other is dangerous, but fast and pervasive. Maya did not hesitate. We choose the way my father would choose. Quickly. Ethan nodded. Then let's do it. That afternoon, they rented a small space in an old studio about 3 miles from downtown. Rick, the technician who had helped them broadcast the last time, arrived first and set up the line. Rick looked at them, his eyes tense but sparkling with confidence. The signal goes through 3 intermediate servers this time. If they cut one, the other 2 will still stay on. But there's a problem. What is it? Avery asked. I got a tracking alert. Someone is tracking our IP address. Maya looked at Ethan. He said softly, Robert Kane. Avery sighed. We have to be faster than them. Rick gave the OK sign. Ready signal. Start in 5 minutes. The room was silent. Maya adjusted the microphone. Avery stood behind the camera. Ethan sat beside her, hands on the keyboard. When the red light came on, everything became strangely quiet. Maya's voice rang out, slow and clear. This is Maya Brooks. Today, I bring you the final part of the Blue Water Files. It shows that Haven Industries never disappeared. They changed their name, changed their form, but they continued to poison new lands. And the man behind it, Robert Kane. On the screen, images of contracts and documents were shown sequentially. Avery added a voiceover. You are seeing evidence that millions of dollars have been transferred through the virtual fund continuum and international money laundering network. Ethan looked into the camera, his voice deep and strong. I am Ethan Ward. I was the founder of Ward Tech, and today, I admit I let power and profit blind me. I cannot fix the past, but I can give the future to those who deserve it. Flashing lights. Rick frowned. They're cutting the signal. Avery shouted, Push the sub-signal. Rick typed quickly, sweat beading on his forehead. The words signal reconnected lit up. Maya continued, her voice unwavering. My father, Samuel Brooks, died searching for this truth. But I believe, if he were alive, he would say the truth cannot be buried. She looked straight into the camera, and I also believe that people deserve to know who is running the world they live in. There was a loud knock on the door. A man's voice shouted from outside. Open the door. This is a federal agent. Rick looked at Avery, eyes panicked. They're here. Avery didn't turn back. Keep broadcasting. Don't stop. Ethan stood up and walked to the door. I'll hold them back. Maya took his hand. No, you can't. He looked at her, smiling calmly. You once told me that kindness is the only thing left when everything falls apart. Let me do it this time. The door shuddered. Ethan stepped out, closing it behind him. Maya turned, tears welling in her eyes, but she continued speaking. If someone is listening, don't let them turn it off. Don't let the truth disappear again. The noise outside was intense shouts, boots, metal. The lights were still flashing in the room. Rick shouted, We're broadcasting nationwide. Maya gasped, but continued. I am not a hero. I am simply the daughter of a man who believed that even in the darkness, there is light. And today, I believe that more than ever. The noise in the hallway stopped. The door swung open. 2 men in black suits rushed in, but Rick hit the data lock button. The screen read, Upload complete. Avery stepped forward, blocking the camera. You're late. 3 hours later, the news spread across America. Television stations rebroadcast the 8-minute broadcast, but it was enough to shake the entire financial and political system. Federal agents issued arrest warrants for Robert Kane and related executives in his office in New York. Kane watched the video, his face pale. He slammed his fist on the table, but Maya's voice echoed in the video. The light doesn't have to be strong. It just has to exist. He slumped in his chair. For the first time in years, Robert Kane felt defeated not by the loss of money, but by the loss of the right to concealment. The next morning, Ethan woke up in a hospital room. White light shone through the curtains. On the bedside table, there was a small bouquet of flowers and a folded piece of paper. In Maya's familiar handwriting, we won. The truth has been seen. Thank you for teaching me that courage is not just about standing up, but also about staying where it is needed. Ethan placed the letter on his chest, closed his eyes, and smiled. He knew his journey of redemption had finally come to an end. A month later, Maya stood at the podium in the auditorium where she had studied. Her speech was called Light in the Darkness. Her voice was slow, warm, and powerful. The truth does not immediately make us stronger. It hurts us. It makes us lose, but then it sets us free. And when we are free, we have the power to change the world. Below, Avery sat silently, looking at Maya with pride. Rick was there too, camera in hand, recording every moment. The light shone through the glass window, reflecting off Maya's hair. In that moment, she was no longer the coffee girl she had once been. She was a symbol of something simple yet powerful, the belief that light, however small, could pierce the darkness. A year after Blue Water, Merrimack was a different town. The once poison river was blue again, on the banks. Children laughed as they threw stones into the clear water. The sky was clear, the clouds white like washed-up memories. On the main street, a small cafe had just opened. A hand-lettered oak sign hung out front, the Truth Cafe. Maya Brooks stood behind the counter. She wore a brown apron, her hair pulled back, and a soft smile lit her face. The door opened, a small bell rang, and the smell of roasting coffee filled the air. Avery Holt walked in, bringing with him a cool spring breeze. "You kept your promise, didn't you?" Maya smiled, pouring her an espresso. "I promise. A place where people speak the truth, listen to the truth, and live the truth." Avery looked around. The cafe was small, its walls lined with photos Maya's father at an old typewriter, Ethan Ward smiling by a well in Montana, and the three of them at the presentation of the final Blue Water report. Avery sat down at the table near the window. "Did you ever think it would all end like this?" Maya looked out, where the sun was shining through the glass, casting a golden glow on the wooden floor. "No, I used to think the truth only brought pain. But now, I understand. It is also the thing that heals people." Avery smiled. "I just got back from Washington. Ethan was nominated for an honorary citizen award for his contributions to the National Environmental Restoration Program." Maya paused, her voice quiet. "He deserved it. He paid with everything." Avery was silent for a moment, then said, "He sent you this." She placed an old, worn brown envelope on the table. Maya opened it, and inside was a handwritten letter and a small photograph. The photo shows Ethan standing on a snowy hill in Montana, with hundreds of workers planting trees in the background. The letter reads in slanted but steady handwriting Maya. "I have always believed that light is not found in high places, but in the hearts of those who know how to keep it. I have seen that light in you. Keep shining it on others. Ethan." Maya folded the letter, her eyes stinging. She didn't cry, just smiled the smile of someone who understands that every ending is just a new beginning. Late afternoon. The cafe is busier. Locals, tourists, a few young reporters all come, not just for the coffee, but for the stories. A small sign on the wall reads, "Tell your truth." Beneath it are hundreds of slips of paper with confessions, some small, some heartbreaking, but all true. A middle-aged man approached and asked softly, "Are you Maya Brooks?" "Yes, it's me. I just want to thank you. Thanks to you, this town is saved. My son is cured." He squeezed her calloused hand. Maya just nodded, speechless, after the man left. Avery looked at her. "You see, sometimes light doesn't have to shine everywhere, just enough to shine on one person. That's enough." Maya nodded, "And that light will spread, little by little." Night fell, and the cafe emptied. Maya cleared the tables and wiped down the counter. Outside, the wind blew through the trees, carrying the scent of earth and coffee. She opened her father's old notebook and wrote one last line on the faded pages. "The truth doesn't end with pain. It ends with hope." She put the book in the drawer and turned off the light. But before she left, She stopped and turned on a small lamp on the counter, its warm glow illuminating the framed photo of Ethan and her father. The next morning, Avery left Merrimack for Portland. Before she left a magazine on the table. The cover showed Maya smiling in a cafe, with the headline, "The Truth Cafe When Truth Becomes Legacy." Maya read, then put the paper down, her eyes distant. She walked to the door and looked out at the Merrimack River. The water shimmered, reflecting the sunlight. In the wind, she heard her father whisper, "You did it, Maya." She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Her heart was at peace. On the other side of the country, Ethan Ward sat on his wooden porch, watching the sun set over the mountains. Beside him was a new diary. The first words he wrote, "I met people who I believed would change the world. They had no power, no money, but they had something I had lost, faith." He put down his pen and looked into the distance, where the last rays of sunlight lingered on the ground. He smiled and said softly to himself, "Thank you, Maya." A year later, in Washington, a small memorial was erected in the garden of the National Press Institute. It was engraved with the words, "For Samuel Brooks, Ethan Ward, and all who lived for the truth." Below is a quote from Maya Brooks. "The light never goes out. Only people forget how to see it." Back in Merrimack, the Truth Cafe is still open every night. People still tell stories, laugh, share, and leave lighter than when they arrived. Maya often stood by the window, looking at the light coming from inside a small light, but persistent, like the journey she had taken. And somewhere in her heart, she knew the legacy of light lies not in news reports or articles, but in every person who dares to live truthfully, dares to love, dares to forgive, and dares to hope. As the night fell, she whispered, as if sending a message, "Thank you for believing. Thank you for staying." The light in the cafe was still on. That light, small but eternal, illuminated her world, and those who believed the truth was worth telling. As the last light in the Truth Cafe went out, Maya Brooks smiled. She had come a long way from a small black waitress to a woman who dared to stand up for truth. And perhaps we were all like her at one time, lost, confused, but still yearning to believe in something good. The story, Undercover Billionaire Orders Coffee, is not only about truth and justice, but also about kindness, forgiveness, and faith. It reminds us that even if you have made a mistake, you can still redeem yourself with a right action. No matter how dark the world is, as long as one person keeps the light in his heart, the darkness will retreat. Ethan chose to make amends through action. Maya chose to forgive and continue to believe, and they both found peace. You may not be able to change the world, but you can change one person with just kindness and sincerity. Thank you for joining me through this story. If you felt a little warmth, a little faith, or just saw yourself in it, please like, share this video, and subscribe to the channel so we can continue telling stories that touch the heart. Because sometimes just your stay is enough light to make the world a better place.